Nearly 2 years after the Grenfell Tower fire, residents of other tower blocks, which still have flammable cladding on them, we know hundreds of them do, are accusing the government of abandoning them to financial ruin. Developers of most private buildings have refused to pay to remove the material. That means that flat owners have been quoted up to £70,000 each to take it down. And until they do, they're having to pay for a 24-hour safety patrol for flats that no one wants to buy. In a moment, we'll speak to a woman affected by this. Before that, talkRadio's Alex Dibble has this report.
I'm standing on the 10th floor balcony at Northpoint, a block in London. There is a fire exit sign right here, and that sign is pinned to flammable cladding that covers this building. Anne Kellett has owned a flat here for 15 years, and Anne, you're 68. How are you and other people coping?
I rely on this flat for as part of my pension, and I know until the cladding etc. is resolved, then I just won't be able to rent it, and I will have to pay council tax to Bromley Council. We are just paying out additional money, so as a retiree, it's a disaster.
A few steps from Anne's flat is Ritu's. Now, she saved up 8 years to buy it and is now struggling with the extra bills.
Our service charge went up from about £2,100 a year to £7,000 a year for me, and that has been the case for the last 2 years. If I don't pay, then I will be in contempt of my lease terms and I will be taken to court. So that has been a huge financial burden. On weekdays, I do waking watch shifts. That is, I patrol the building from 7 p.m. till midnight after coming back from work at minimum wage. So again, instead of spending time with my family after coming home, which is what normal people do after working full time, this is what I have to do.
The situation is mirrored across the country. I'm at Citygate in Manchester, a nice looking red brick tower block, but next to the red bricks on it is flammable cladding. It's estimated removing it will cost more than £10,000 per flat.
Mark Bottrell, I live in flat 74.
Josh Beaumont, 27 years old, and I've lived here 2.5 years.
I was also made redundant in January, because if I've suddenly got to pay, thousands and thousands of pounds, I'm suddenly in a bit of trouble. Like, in a few months' time, I might not be able to afford this, and my flat will be taken away from me. It's horrendous, isn't it? I mean, having your home taken away, it's going to rip your gut out, really, isn't it, really? And suddenly be homeless, practically. I won't have anywhere to go.
We saw the tragedy that happened at Grenfell, and you almost think, what would happen if there was a fire here? You think it'll never happen to you, but since the issue of Grenfell, then, yeah, it is a worry.
Absolutely extraordinary report there from talkRadio's Alex Dibble. Let's talk to Rachel Guy now, who's a resident at Northpoint in Bromley. Good morning to you, Rachel.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, you lived in your block for 4 years,
yes.
And you're facing, again, just many of these same problems as you were talking about with our reporter, Alex, that you're in a building that you're told is unsafe. You're having to contribute to the cost of these 24-hour safety patrols. These are, of course, being paid for by local councils, people in council blocks. But you think the obvious solution would be, well, you know what, sell up and leave. Of course, no one wants to buy your flat.
No, I mean, the flats basically have no value at the moment. I mean, there is the financial aspect is a major strain on all of us. But the other difficulties we have are dealing with the constant awareness of the physical danger in the block and the mental strain of actually dealing with our ongoing situation. I mean, we've got actually 3 types of cladding on this building, including ACM, but all 3 types of cladding have been rated as the most flammable, given an A3 rating. Just to give you one example of the awareness of the physical danger we're in, we have 2 staircases, which is lovely. That's a luxury to have two escape staircases in the building, but they are both wrapped head to foot in ACM cladding with no fire breaks. There are no fire breaks in the cladding, the whole height of the stairwells. Now, we've been told the fire would go from the ground floor to the top floor in 7 minutes flat, and obviously that provides a route for the fire to spread across at every level of the building. One fire officer who attended the block actually told us that they may as well have coated the building in petrol. The cladding is that flammable.
But this is the extraordinary thing. You've got this cladding. It was put on, again, to make it all look very nice, as what's happened with the Grenfell Tower. And yet you've got no legal recourse. I mean, given that this is the most flammable cladding, can you not, as residents, have a group action and sue the builders, the contractors who put it on? Is that possible?
Well, our freeholder has basically said he would walk away rather than pay anything. He's refusing to remediate the cladding. He says it's the government's responsibility. Our contractors, we're in a slightly different position to some building because our building was converted in 1999 and then sold on by the original contractor to another large company who have also refused responsibility. They say the government says it's a freeholder's responsibility and therefore they're not prepared to.
So everyone's basically passing the buck. Meanwhile, you, like everyone else, you're just facing more and more service charges, and also, as you're saying in the interview with Alex Dibble there, as more and more people simply can't afford to pay and default on their homes, then fewer and fewer of you are left with more and more costs. And you're really, the forgotten victims of this, aren't you? Because, the Grenfell Tower fire, horrific fire, was in June 2017. We are almost 2 years on from that. We know there's still many people still living in council blocks that are trying to take the cladding down. As you say, they're having these 24-hour safety patrols. Now, a lot of this work in the council is being paid for by taxpayers. It's a huge extra cost. We know there are ongoing legal issues with some of these firms as well. But for private residents like you, everyone's kind of forgotten that you're left in this limbo with a home you can't sell, you're not safe in, and you can't afford anymore.
Well, and that's the other part, apart from the physical danger, the kind of mental strain of dealing with that situation. And it is the feeling of absolute powerlessness and everybody kicking the ball around between each other. The government, one of the real things that causes us the most kind of frustration is the government makes these big headline statements, and that is an absolute disjunct between what they say and the reality we actually face. People say to us, oh, but the government has said it's fine, they're going to make the freeholders pay. There is no legal force to the government statement that the freeholders will have to pay. The government have said they're giving powers to the councils to enforce the removal of the cladding and that this will be done at the freeholders' cost. Well, actually, there are three issues with that statement. One is that it actually breaks down to an addendum to existing legislation, which requires an assessment process through the Housing, Health and Safety Rating System. Now, we've been liaising with Bromley Council for the last few months, and they have made it absolutely clear to us that going through this process will not necessarily result in the removal of the cladding from the building, despite what the government has said this. The government has said they've established a joint inspection team to provide expert guidance to the councils. This joint inspection team, I mean, we've written to the government and said this actually doesn't exist as such. They've got one guy in place. They're having trouble recruiting people. They said that the government has said that the council will recover the cost from the freeholder. There is no legal force to that.
So you're, once again, the residents who've done nothing wrong are caught in the middle. Rachel Guy, thank you so much for speaking to us. She's a resident at Northpoint in Bromley. Do point you to our website, talkradio.co.uk, where we've got more details on that story. An extraordinary story there.